Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Depressed Dealer, and this is Langrisser Mobile Apex Season 11. Okay, it's been a while since I've done a battle in this time slot. This is the crack of morning time slot, so for Central Time, it's essentially 3 a.m. But I went up against this person who I will not attempt to pronounce, and at first I looked at it, I was like, oh, that's kind of a normal balanced box for the most part. It has a lot of the characters can be AoE or hybrid or some assassins. Of course, they have Wedum because they always do. Um, and I was like, oh, well, that's nice. This should hopefully be easy. And they went and banned my Sherry first. I banned their Wedum. This week, there are two new characters, Julian and Wandering Duelist. I don't expect to see either of them in any upcoming matches. Julian, I believe, is okay, but Wandering Duelist is a bit difficult to actually use properly. I went ahead and took Rose and Seal here, as usual, my opener. And the pattern was pretty obvious at this point. They're banning my assassins. I have essentially 6 assassins, so pretty much if they focus purely on banning assassins, I usually have to grab Rose and Seal first, so it usually leaves me with only 1 assassin. So they grab Christiane, so they're probably going to deal with my mages that way. I went and got rid of, since they grabbed Christiane first, I went and got rid of Sherry and Lucretia first, because they would have been a lot more difficult to deal with. Sorry, my cat's being distracting. Alright, and usually at this point I would grab something like Ironblood Chancellor or something like that, or sorry, Chancellor, Ironblood Commander, and then for my third I would grab an Assassin, but this time I was like, well, you know, maybe my opponent won't grab an Assassin if I already grab one, so I was like, I'll grab Zeradet, because, you know, I don't use her that often. She has a faction buff, so that gives me a little bit of flexibility, but to be honest, that wasn't really a good pick, because Meteor Faction would buff herself, and 2 other people. That's pretty much it. And the only other person in one of the other people is my assassin, which, as you can clearly see, they're banning my assassins, which they just did. So they banned Silvaria and Kayura. I'm not sure how this match would have gone if I had went with any of those other 2. If I were to go with anyone else, I would have gone with Silvaria, because then faction buff would work. So for me, I was like, all right, well, they grabbed Kayura, but there's no faction buff for her on their side. So at this point, I was like, well, I don't want to give any extra mobility. I also did not want to deal with those crystal barriers in this particular match. So I went ahead and got rid of Rose and Seal, got rid of their Ironblood Commander, grabbed my Ironblood Commander, and at this point, they're just going after DPS. Went with Liana, so they grabbed a healer already. I wasn't too concerned about Iris in this case. Went ahead and got rid of their remaining assassin, got rid of Luna, because I did not want to deal with any, because right now the only thing I really have left is casters and a cavalry. So I was like, I need to mitigate their potential. Well, one, Luna does provide mobility, but the other thing is she has like a 30% magic damage reduction aura that's really a pain to deal with on top of Christiane's aura. So with that taken care of, I went ahead and grabbed Lucretia, since she get at least self-res. They went ahead and banned my tank at this point. My biggest concern was Kayura in this case, so I didn't really need a tank in this. Sissy White could have given us an act again, but I already have a healer and I have plenty of mobility here. They grabbed, I guess I haven't really pointed out any of the standouts in this box, but SP Lana. We haven't seen that in forever. Went ahead and banned the remaining healers because I didn't want to deal with any additional mobility. And then that left them with Shafaniel and another tank. I was expecting them to pick Shafaniel just to provide some additional pain, possibly, but obviously with Rose and Seal, it's kind of not that big of a deal. And I went ahead and grabbed, my choices were either to bring another caster with a teleport, which had some potential, but I was like, oh, it's Christiane, this will at least give me some pressure, and if I can get past Christiane's troops, I can actually do some decent damage with cav versus infantry, since every Christiane is always infantry. I've yet to see one that's cavalry. But they actually went with another tank, probably to counter my my Helena there. Okay. So this match is rough. Biggest issue is Kayura, who can actually outrange me in most cases, especially if she gets breeze procced. But the other issue is they have a Liana as turn 2, which means they can essentially do an act again without sacrificing initiative, because they don't have initiative. So I went with standard Zerda Hellfire Archers with 3C backstab and faction buff. You'll definitely kind of see the issues that Zerda nowadays has and why most people don't take her along anymore. Lucretia, I actually did opt for Firebrand Snipers because I was like, I need to be able to punch through Angels, Christiane if they went with that, but my opponent actually did not take Angels. So the Firebrand Snipers was not that useful. It does do fixed damage, percentage based, which is nice if assuming they're not fixed damage immune. Standard Iron Blood Commander, I didn't need attack mass attack for this one, so I did grab Commander's Ferocity for another attack. Rosen Seal standard kit, all AoE heals with faction buff. Helena, I brought Angels because my opponent was practically all magic, with the exception of the tanks. Windhand brought Chivalry for some extra mobility, and that's about it. 3C with her usual auras. I don't think there's anything else to point out. Oh, Lucretia, standard single target build. And that's pretty much it. So, like I said, biggest issue here is the Kayura, and until I can kill a unit, it's going to be a big issue. Now, one thing that also stands out is I was 100% expecting Lana to be AoE. Single target Lana is not... I mean, she's good in PvE, but in PvP, she doesn't have the mobility, even with the teleport she has. So I was 100%. I was expecting AoE Lana, because AoE Lana can take Redeemers, and then if you don't have... if you can't get a debuff onto her, she essentially gets a self-res, which is why I banned their Rosen Seal, because I was expecting Lana to be like, alright, you know, take Redeemers, get the Crystal Barriers from Rosen Seal. That ensures I don't get a debuff, in which case I can just run around and nuke stuff and have a self-res. Then Redeemers are actually surprisingly durable if you can keep them at 100% life. But didn't go with any of that. I don't know if this was just an attempt to counterpick, simply because, like, okay, I banned the Rosen Seal, so obviously Lana's a lot more vulnerable now, so maybe doing this is better. Also, the fact I have Rosen Seal means AoE is a little less effective, so who knows. Anyway. So like I mentioned before, the issue is not just the Kayura, it's the fact there's a Kayura and a Liana with an act again. So what's going to end up happening is Kayura has some flexibility as far as positioning. She could very well go right about here. Let's see, what's the range of this? It should be... Oh, this one's 3 blocks. So it's actually... Oh, no, sorry, 2 blocks for act again. So Kayura could go here and then go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to there, and then have 1, 2, 3. And assuming she has the staff, it'll be 4 range here. I am actually a little curious to see if she has the range 4 staff, because honestly, her int is really... It was pretty high, from what I can tell. Yeah, it's comparable to Lucretia's. Seeing that, it made me feel like she doesn't actually have the range staff, and actually opted for the maybe an intelligence staff of some sort. I don't remember if she does or not, and I actually wanted to go ahead and use this video to figure out if she did, because that would have made my life a lot easier if I had realized that. Because yeah, that's once she gets a 20% int buff, she'll match Lucretia even with a faction buff. It's pretty intense. So, since I don't know where Kayura is going to go, I don't know if Kayura has the staff, even though by stats I should have assumed that she didn't. I mean, if she does, if she has the stats with the staff, that the range staff, that's she wins. But yeah, I have to kind of just pass my turns and see what she does. As you can see, my opponent is very well aware of where the cards lay, so the last actions are always going to be Kayura and Liana. So even if Kayura takes a turn, depending on where she positions, if she gets act again, I can't actually push forward. So I'm kind of just passing turn in place, getting my mobility buffs up, and getting faction buffs up. I'm a little comfortable with moving Helena around, since I did actually remember to bring angels, and as long as she's in her own terrain, she gets damage reduction. So she can generally tank it. Yeah, and their troop types are sorceresses, so they have just magic damage. Angels by themselves reduce magic damage by 45%, which is really significant. So until they get through the angels, they're not going to be able to do anything to her. Alright, so Liana opted to buff this round. So just in comparison, this is Lucretia with faction buff, 1591, and this is Kayura with the 20% from essentially Gospel. And you can see very close. She almost matches Lucretia's intelligence. Really, really powerful. So freely moving around my Helena, like I mentioned before, I'm not really that threatened. To be honest, I should have probably went ahead and start pushing forward at this point with Helena and just get that crystal stuff up closer and closer. I'm fine with just using my my heals. They do have longer cooldowns than the standard single target heals, but if I am able to survive a hit and actually need a heal, I'm in a much better situation than I thought I was. Essentially, is the idea here, because assassins are designed to one-shot. So I'm under the assumption that my opponent has the staff, which means I extend the range by 2. One, because her skills are all 3 range, and then another because of the staff. So with that in mind, I was like, alright, well, I'm going to move in. Zeratus going to go ahead and 3C. And as you can see, I have a decent amount of coverage, but I can't reach anything this round. So unless my opponent purposely moves in range, I can't actually take advantage of this. And as you can see, my opponent's like, yeah, I'll just stand here. I'm fine with waiting. So at this point, I was like, alright, whatever. I'm just going to take a shot here. So Impure Shockwave. I think if I had Sorceresses in this part, I probably would have gotten kill here. But since I brought Firebrand Snipers, the physical damage was reduced by 30% purely from phalanxes already. And then there's the range damage reduction that she already has built in. Yeah, it takes 10% less range damage. And then, of course, the reduction from that, from her talent. But I was like, you know what, I'll poke her, see what happens, and then I can pull back the golem. Technically, the golem's in range to be hit. But it did force Liana to go ahead and heal. So I was like, whatever, I'll just move around. I went into hills to get myself more defense. And then at this point, as you can see, my opponent is just staying out of range. I could go after tanks, but there's no way I'm going to kill a tank with Zerda here. So I was like, alright, well, I'll just fall back. Keep hide and seek active. Okay, so yeah, this Kayura did not have the range staff. I didn't actually realize that. So I actually had a lot more flexibility as far as pushing forward than I thought I did. It also explains why her intelligence is so freaking high. She does have a Twilight Star though, so Rosen Seal is actually vulnerable. So I was a little surprised that my opponent did not take advantage of... Well, actually, I think my opponent had the same assumption, which is Rosen Seal's heals are not going to be what is going to win me the match here, because, again, assassins will one-shot you. So at this point I was like, alright, well, I lost my puppet, which means I lost my additional 2 range from for Lucretia here. Go ahead and use this opportunity to go ahead and reapply my formation to get the mobility buff again. I also got a Tenyu breeze from that. As you can see, I'm just kind of moving around. Again, at this point my opponent could have probably gotten kill at this point and just fell back. Yeah, she could have just went here, hit here, Twilight Star plus 3C would have killed Rosen Seal. And I'm pretty sure my opponent's going to regret not killing her. But that's okay. So as you can see, I'm just fine with just throwing buffs around. I don't really... it's not what's going to win me the match. So at this point I was like, okay, I think at this point I was kind of getting wise to it. I didn't, like I mentioned before, I didn't pay attention to what staff was being used. But I was like, that's a lot of intelligence. So I was like, you know what? I'll go into 4 range here. And worst case scenario is, if I'm wrong, my Kayura will kill my Zerida, but should not be able to get back in range. No, she could have. So it was kind of a waste either way. But since she doesn't have a range staff, it doesn't matter. So right now my opponent kind of has the advantage, because obviously Kayura doesn't require any setup to do what, while Zerida has to spend around doing her 3C. But since the mist is now closing in, that advantage is kind of wilting away. I only have one target that's even a potential target, and that's Liana. She is a mage Liana, so that means Twilight Star will work on her. So as long as her helmet doesn't bring her back to 100% life, the Shrine Maidens won't save her. And I think my opponent realized that. I was like, you know what, I'm just going to back off. And I'm pretty sure this Christian positioned here just to prevent me from standing in that spot. So if I am to go after Liana, I have to go into the mist. And I don't think my opponent believes I'll do that. Because obviously, even if you have a move again or an act again from your actions, taking any sort of action in Poison Fog is instant death, no matter what. Self-resing does work, though. Yeah. Now, I guess I haven't really been talking about Hilda's 3C, but she's been opting to go Cavalry, purely probably the counter Iron Blood Commander here. Alright, but it does technically make her a little bit more vulnerable to Helena, which is nice. So I was like, you know what, I'll pass turns, reapply my faction buff, let's see what my opponent does. Because at this point, my opponent has... yeah, as you can see, the safe spots are being kind of taken up at this point. Kayura can't go here because I'll get her with Zerida, which means her only spot to stay is here. And then afterwards, I think my opponent's hoping I'll just pass turn with Zerida again, and then Liana can finally move in and safely stand somewhere safe. Because at that point, I won't be able to bypass guard until I reapply it, but I didn't. I was like, I have to do something, so did backstab. So it was actually backstab that actually did the damage, enough damage to ensure that the helmet didn't heal her back to 100%, which also meant that she didn't actually have anything equipped that negated fixed damage, because backstab you can actually resist. So with that, I actually killed their Liana, which is actually significant, because now they don't have any healing whatsoever besides Kayura with her 3C. The problem is both their tanks have self-reses, and they're actually both, you know, top tier tanks. So I have to kind of figure out what I'm going to do from here. But I did kill the Liana, which means they actually go first. So they have to act at this point. So at this point I was like, alright, let's see what my opponent does. Now one thing to note is Kayura, since they no longer have 5 people, Kayura's intelligence has dropped, and her mobility dropped. So now she doesn't really have the pressure before. But at the same time, I also don't have my assassin anymore. So at this point I was like, whatever, let's just go in. So I was hoping for something here. I wasn't expecting kill, and I didn't, obviously. They have phalanxes, so don't expect much. So the key thing to note here is what I'm hoping for is Lana goes in for the kill and stands right here. In order for Lana to even be in range, she would have to have... she either has to have a range staff, in which case she can stand pretty much anywhere within 4 range, but otherwise her range is only 3 because of her talent. So, with that in mind, she moved in. So, Elemental Destruction. it's her 3C, so definitely was not going to survive it. So here's the significant part. Kayura's mobility is 3, which means her only safe spot is these 3 spaces here. So if I were to do something cheeky like this, I can also take advantage of the fact that Hilda right now is Cav and just kill her once. But obviously the target here is just to keep Kayura out. I think at this point my opponent was spamming some emotes saying I needed our break. I think my opponent was actually a little concerned at this point. So. Alright, Starshine, the sorceresses versus Angels. She wasn't at full life, so she didn't even have the bonuses for sorceresses. So at this point I was like, alright, let's go ahead and deal with you next. So, 3C. Even with Cav, it didn't matter. And he also healed Helena further. So, Element of Destruction. But it actually didn't kill. So Elemental Destruction is essentially all the base elements, so it does have an advantage against like infantry. So it had an advantage on the mercenaries, but I don't know what happened here actually. Yeah, I'm a little uncertain what happened here because. So obviously she lost helmet and accessory skills, which dropped her intelligence by a ton. But let me check. Oh, okay, so that's what happened. Okay, so Imperial Radiance procced here, and there was only 3 buffs that could be dispelled here. One of them would have been damage, and the other one, of course, would have been the attack. Otherwise, it would have been in magic defense. So it was a good chance I was going to reduce her damage anyway. Yeah, so that's what happened. I took out her attack buff. I think even with the attack buff, I don't think it would have done enough. So she did get some self-healing from her 3C, but as you can see, she's hurting now. So now we still need to get through Christiane, but there's no healers. So with that in mind, I was like, alright, well, let's go ahead and heal up. Again, my opponent was spamming emotes during this. But it's 3-on-2. Christiane decided to attack my Rosen Seal, which did okay damage for what you may expect. So I did something a little weird here. My focus here was just to get the mobility buff back up, or more specifically the soldier buff. Yeah, increases soldier attack. I wanted as much attack power as possible. The other thing I wanted also was to get some more passive healing for Ironblood Commander here. So I did Scarlet Awakening here. Use that to reapply my formation. And then I'll get passive healing from the Mercenaries, passive healing from Rosen Seal's talent. And as you can see, I'm all buffed up here. And so I moved in. So this is her 2C skill. My opponent did have First Strike, but I have infantry troops against. Actually, I want to see that again. So, yeah, they hit me first, obviously. Yeah, that was just purely her. She just did so much damage. Yeah, and okay, I didn't really dispel anything significant there, it doesn't look like. But yeah, at this point, my opponent's like, alright, well, gonna do your Elemental Destruction again. Still can't get killed. At this point, she didn't have her bonuses from her accessory or her armor, which means her intelligence had dropped to around like 1100, which, yeah, it wasn't gonna do anything. Like right now, it's Shrine Maidens have 850 magic defense, so So with that, she just couldn't do anything. And so at this point, I was like, well, normal attack should be good enough. And then my opponent said I needed a break again with the emotes, and then promptly gave up. So yeah, this match was crazy. It's not often that I actually purposely let myself die in the mist just to get some sort of advantage. My opponent did make some significant mistakes. It doesn't look like, I don't think the Lana had the range staff. I didn't pay that much attention to it, but I'm pretty sure she didn't. So with that in mind, like literally, if my opponent had used Kayura instead, I think for the kill on Lucretia, it would have been a very different match. Because at that point, I would have been kind of screwed. Because I would be kind of screwed at that point. Because Kayura, every time I hit Kayura with any sort of AoE from Helena's 1C, it would have done some passive healing and all that nonsense. So yeah, unfortunately that mistake ended up costing her, and I ended up getting the advantage at that point. Also, taking out their Leon, I also ensured they had no heals or buffs for Kayura, which made her much weaker. So yeah, neat little match. I wasn't expecting it to be that difficult, but it was. Getting there on Gold 3, I'm expecting to probably lose next week, because that's usually how it goes for me. But if I do win the next match, I may go for a second match to try to get to Gold 2 and get some additional rewards. Besides that, there's not really much else to talk about. There was, I didn't really mention this during the summoning video, but they did bring in Forbidden Battleground. These ones were really annoying. But I did use Wandering Duelist for the Meteor Strike version, and honestly, being able to disable those passives with her 1C and her 2C abilities actually helped out more than I expected. And then the fixed damage she does, even at 4 stars, is reasonably decent. So yeah. Besides that, I'm gonna go ahead and call it here. I am the Depressed Eagle. This was Langrisser Mobile Apex Season 11. I'll see you guys later.